All right, everyone. Good evening and welcome. We'll go ahead and get started with some introductions and let people trickle in as they need to. Let me just turn off that sound so it doesn't ping when they come in. So welcome. My name is Sophia Zanowski. I'm the Director of Development and Registrar at St. Bernard's. I'm very excited to be here with you all this evening. I just have a couple of things to go over, some introductions about who we are, what we do before we get to the reason why you are all here tonight. As I am the Director of Development, I wanted to say thank you to anyone who donated at the time of registration. Of course, it was voluntary, but we very much appreciate it. It helps us put on events like this one, which is part of I think the most exciting part of my job. I really love being able to do this and put on our events with you all. So also, as the registrar, I do some tech support for our classroom tech. So if you run into any issues, feel free to put them in the chat box. I will be monitoring that tonight as well. So we have two co-sponsors tonight putting on this event that put on this series, Words with Wine, and I want to talk a little bit about who we are. So I'm representing St. Bernard's. We are a graduate theological school located in upstate New York with campuses in Rochester and Albany, but we also serve students from across New York State and the country. We have graduate programs in theology and philosophy, and then we also have 4 brand new certificate programs where you can take our graduate courses without needing to commit to a full master's degree and without needing to have a bachelor's degree. You kind of take a cluster of our graduate courses on a niche area. So one of our certificates that I like to talk about at Words with Wine is our certificate in Catholicism and the Fine Arts, which is kind of what all about Words with Wine is all about, right? Talking about faith and the classics, and we have a certificate all about that. So if you love this series, that certificate in those classes might be for you. We have a couple of upcoming offerings that I wanted to mention. So this series, Words with Wine, we offer every third Thursday of the month. So next month on March 18th, Sister Nancy Hawkins, who is one of our theology professors, will be discussing the film of Gods and Men. So be on the lookout for information about that. We also offer a series called Theology and Culture on the first Thursday of every month that discusses a hot topic and kind of the faith spin on that topic. So on March 4th, the first Thursday of March, we have Dr. Angela Franks from St. John's Seminary that will be talking about the sexed body. Then we also just announced that this summer, we will be running a free audit initiative where anyone can take one of our classes as an auditor this summer for free. You only have to pay a $25 tech fee. So this is really exciting. We love auditors. We love having auditors in our courses because you get to engage with the discussions, take the classes, but you don't have to do any of the assignments. You don't have to write any of the papers. And we're offering it this summer because we have 8-week courses and we have a lot of fun electives. Charles is teaching 2 courses this semester. Dr. Hughes Huff, who's our presenter tonight, he's teaching a course on elementary Greek and a course on Christian scriptures. So if you really love Charles and what he talks about this evening, I encourage you to consider auditing one of his classes this summer. Now, we partnered with New Clairvaux Vineyard back when the pandemic hit, so last spring, to put on this series, Words with Wine. We wanted a way to come together to get to talk about something that is un-pandemic related, and we thought, what better, the fine arts, which we love, and the faith, of course, which we love. And we partnered with New Clairvaux Vineyard. We're located in New York, they're located in California, so this partnership literally spans the country, coast to coast. Our namesake is St. Bernard of Clairvaux. Their namesake, obviously, Clairvaux, they have it right in their name. So we share that with them. And if you know anything about Cistercian Trappist monks, which St. Bernard's was back in the 14th century, you know that they commit their lives to prayer and labor. And they usually live out that mission by choosing a product and making it really, really well. So at New Clairvaux Vineyard, that community obviously makes wine. And so we share, not only that connection through our namesake, but we also share in their mission. And we've loved partnering with them to put on this series, which is now running almost a year strong. All right. And so without further ado, let me introduce our presenter this evening, Dr. Charles Hughes Huff, who is our assistant professor of sacred scripture. And he's been with us at St. Bernard since this past summer. He earned his PhD in Hebrew Bible and the ancient Near East at the University of Chicago. He studied how ancient authors portray social practices in narratives and how they use technical and metaphorical language to make ritual authoritative. He's also interested in how scholars rely on modern ethical stances to evaluate ancient Middle Eastern social practices, particularly punishments. Dr. Hughes Huff is an experienced teacher and he cares very deeply about pedagogy. He's taught courses in Bible, the reception of the Bible in popular culture, ethics and moral theology, social justice, philosophy, among many others. Like I mentioned this summer, he'll be teaching courses on elementary Greek and Christian scriptures. Outside the classroom, Dr. Hughes Huff enjoys wine and cycling, but not at the same time. And we are very thrilled to have him here with us this evening. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Dr. Hughes Huff.
Thank you, Sophia. And thank you all of you for coming tonight. It's really great to be with you. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk through some of the texts that we have looked at. Perhaps you've read them, perhaps you haven't. Either way, it's totally fine. And I'm going to sort of walk us through them with a bit of a presentation on them and a little less of a sort of discussion question format than sometimes we've had with Words for Wine, just because I want to set the stage for the discussion that we can then have afterwards. So that's the format. But if you have any questions or any comments at any time, I'm totally raise your hand or hit the chat box or shout out my name, whatever works for you, all right? So today the topic is Netherworld Journeys and Christ's Harrowing of Hell. And we're gonna talk about each of these terms, really. Netherworld, journeys, and harrowing and hell. All of these things are gonna be things that we hit upon. And I want to start by talking about journeys. We're going to think about this idea of the hero's journey. And this is something that Joseph Campbell and the sort of structuralist school of literature point to and as a universal feature of much literature. And I don't know that I hold to their structuralism, but I also find the category useful. When you think about something that might be very familiar to us, to some of you anyway, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Catholic favorite. We find that the encounter with hell or hell-like places is very important for the heroes of the story. Frodo gets into the Barrow White's grave, and he's changed by that. All the heroes go into the Underrealm where Gandalf falls and battles a demon, seems to die, and then comes back to life. He has a hell-like experience there and comes up a different wizard, the White Wizard. And then, of course, Frodo descends into a hell-like place, Mordor, where he faces the great red eye of Sauron and ultimately triumphs, but is changed forever as a result. That's just one example of the hero's journey. Here we're going to have focus on netherworld journeys like this in several different kinds of texts. And the ultimate one that we're going to talk about, though, is Christ's harrowing of hell. Now, I want to start with the word harrowing. The word seems to be first used in this context by Alfric, who was a bishop who wrote in Middle English or Old English here, and used the word to speak of this very thing that Christ did. He says in a homily he preached on Easter, he says, the strong Samson betokened Christ, the city of Gaza betokened hell, and the Philistines were a token of the Jewish people who beset the sepulchre of Christ. But Samson would not go empty-handed from the city, but he bare the gates up to the hill. For our Savior Christ brake the gates of hell and delivered Adam and Eve and his chosen of their kin, and joyfully from death arose, and they with him, and ascended to heaven. The wicked he left behind to eternal torments, and now is the gate of hell shut to righteous men and ever open to the unrighteous. Hell acknowledged Christ when it left forth his captives through the harrowing of Jesus. Here's the verb form, heragunga, and Jesus here, as is often in Old English, is called Helendes, which is just the thing they use to mean Jesus. They write his name that way, but it seems to be something like Savior or Healer. So in any case, hell acknowledged Christ when it let forth its captives through the harrowing of Jesus. This is what the harrowing of hell refers to. Not only that Christ descended to hell, and as we recite every day, every Sunday with the creeds, but rather that he grabbed some folks and brought them with him. The harrowing of hell. He triumphed over hell, spoiled hell. He took the goods of hell and brought them up with him. So that is what we're talking about. This is all of that in a brief statement. Breaking the gates, ruining the dominion hell used to have over the dead, and delivering Adam and Eve and the chosen of their kin. And then they go with him to heaven. And this is the harrowing of hell. This was very common in the Middle Ages. This idea flourished and was a major part of a lot of different traditions. Here we have a wonderful Hell's Mouth, where we've got Jesus here defeating hell and Satan over here on the side, and bringing out Adam by the hand, always Adam by the hand, and everybody else with him. Adam grabs Eve, and then everyone else follows. The harrowing of hell. And this illustration goes along with a genre of literature in Middle English called the mystery plays. And these plays would be put on by, most often by guilds. So a city would get together, and each guild would take a different part of the mysteries, and they'd work all the way through the Bible. And this particular quote comes from the mystery plays of the English town of York. And the guild that would put this on are the saddlers, the guys and gals who would make the saddles for the horses and set them up. And it's a play that depicts Jesus coming to hell and Satan saying, "Aha, here you are, I've gotcha." And Jesus saying, "Not so fast." And hell saying, "What's going on?" And then eventually Satan realizes he's been tricked and duped, and the legal status he thought he had is gone. And Jesus says, "Adam and all my friends in fear, all your foes come forth with me. You shall be set in sola sere," that's in light, "where you shall never of sorrows see. And Michael, mine angel clear, receive these souls all unto thee, and lead them all as I shall thee lead to paradise of play and plenty." That's happiness and lots of stuff. "My grave I will go till, ready to rise up aright, and so I shall fulfill that I before have hight." That is pledged. Hight means pledged. So that is your sort of thumbnail sketch of harrowing and where the term harrowing in English comes from. The harrowing of hell, Middle English, mystery plays and sermons that we get this full picture of Jesus bringing up Adam and everyone and Adam's friends. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here. Well, what is hell and how does one get there? To talk about that, we're going to go all the way back to 2100 BC. This is to the Sumerian poem that, if you read, I attached a translation of it, called Bilgamesh and the Underworld. Now, Bilgamesh is the same person as Gilgamesh. You've all heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But Bilgamesh is the Sumerian, an older Sumerian pronunciation. All right, so Sumerian comes before Akkadian, but they're the ones who thought up Bilgamesh and Enkidu, and the Epic of Gilgamesh is in later Babylonian Akkadian. So these Sumerians have a poem here And it talks about Enkidu dying because of his carelessness, and then Bilgamesh figuring out a way to bring up Enkidu's spirit from the Netherworld and ask him all about it. Now, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are best friends, and so this is why Bilgamesh is wanting to check it out and talk with them, see how things are going down in the Netherworld. The nice thing about this is it gives us a very early picture of how humans in the Mesopotamian region were thinking about the Netherworld. That is the place where people go when they die. So I have a few quotes here for us from this text. Here we have the beginning of Bilgamesh and Enkidu seeing each other. He hugged him tight and kissed him. In asking and answering, they made themselves weary. They were chatting so much, separated friends. And then he asked them, did you see the way things are ordered in the Netherworld? If only you could tell me, my friend, if only you could tell me. If I am to tell you the way things are ordered in the Netherworld, it will sit you down and weep. Then let me sit down and weep. The one whom you touch with joy in your heart, he says, I'm going to ruin. Like an old garment, he is infested with lice. Like a crack in the door, he is filled with dust. Oh, woe, cried the Lord, and he sat down in the dust. So what's happening here? Enkidu is saying to Bilgamesh, you don't want to know how bad things are for me in the underworld. I am like an old garment infested with lice. Now, that's a dried out, nasty garment. Like a crack in the floor filled with the dust that you can't reach quite with the broom, the nasty cracked dust down there, that's where I am. So it's a bleak picture. So he goes on to ask, how are things arranged? And I skipped down further in the thing. And here are some ways in which people are faring in the Netherworld. Did you see the man with 5 sons? He starts with 1 and he goes all the way to 5 and 6. You see the man with 5 sons? I saw him. How does he fare? Like a fine scribe with a nimble hand, he enters the palace with ease. Did you see this man with 6 sons? I saw him. How does he fare? Like a man with plows and harness, his heart rejoices. Do you see the man with 7 sons? I saw him. How does he fare? Among the junior deities, he sits on the throne and listens to the proceedings. So the more sons you have, the better off you are in the afterlife. This is not just true in this world, where your sons do things for you and help the farm grow and so on, but also in the netherworld where they're providing you with food and drink. Did you see the man with no heir? I saw him. How does he fare? He eats a bread loaf like a kin-fired brick. That's a metaphor, but we can all get it. We don't want our bread to be that hard, to be brick hard. That is not good bread. So he is unhappy. He's not getting the food that he would like to have in the afterlife. So that is part of this, is that ancestors in the afterworld have to be supplied by food and water by the Sumerians. And that's not happening for those who don't have kids. Then we go to another set of folks. Did you see the leper? I saw him. How does he fare? His food is set apart. His drink is set apart. He eats uprooted grass. He roots for water in the ground. He lives outside the city. This is exactly what a leper would have done in life, right? Because they're cut out from the city, can't be around anyone. So as in life, so in death. Did you see the man affected by pellagra? I saw him. How does he fare? He twitches like an ox as the maggots consume him. That's not very fun. Did you see the man eaten by a lion? I saw him. How does he fare? Bitterly he cries, oh, my hand, oh, my foot. So he doesn't get his hand or his foot back when he dies. The lion keeps it. And so now he's dead and missing limbs. That's why you don't want to die by a lion, among other reasons. Okay, so then did you see the little stillborn babies who knew not names of their own? I saw them. How do they fare? They play amid syrup and ghee at tables of silver and gold. They're doing super well. All stillborn babies, both here and in later texts we're going to see, are doing pretty well in the afterlife. They didn't get the life that God should have given them, so they get rich fare, and they're happy as clams. All right, and then finally we get to a moral question here of a kind. Here, did you see the one who cheated a god and swore an oath? I saw him. How does he fare? He cannot get near the places in the netherworld where the libations of water are made. He drinks in thirst. So here we have what is meant by the command not to take the Lord's name in vain, and not to, and this is both in Exodus and 20, the 10 Commandments, and other places like Leviticus 19 in the Bible, where you take an oath by the name of Yahweh, or in this case, by the name of another God, and then broke it, right? So that's not cool in either the Old Testament or in ancient Sumer. And so that is a punishment. He is doing, even if he did okay in this world, in the afterworld, he's going to be suffering because he did something wrong. All right, so all that said, I have a brief few quotes from that poem. I'd like to point out the following. What kind of spatial features do we have going on here? First of all, we've got dark food, dark, dry, food and water features. So this is a constant thing. How close are we to water and food? How accessible are they? And a hierarchy of place. Some people are doing better than others. Some people, like on stillborn babies, they're good to go and don't even have to rely on anyone else's libations to them. Other people cannot even access where water would be because they're being punished. So there's a hierarchy of place in this early text. Who belongs there? Dead mortals. So all dead mortals belong there. There's no sense that there are some good mortals who go on up to some other happier place, or that there are some bad mortals that go to a worse place than this, but rather that everyone is in this place. And of course, some people are doing better in this place than others, but the afterworld place is all the same place. Right? There's no separation of place from place. Logic of the suffering. As we saw, the suffering in life is the same as suffering in the afterworld. And then children, of course, we noted, are doing super well. And then there are some moral aspects. These aren't the main features. So if you have more children, you'll do better. If you had a good life on earth, we would assume that meant that God's blessed you. So you're going to be doing good in the afterworld as well. And then occasionally you might get a punishment. Temporal aspects, this is ongoing. So there's no, this is how it is. There's no thought of this changing. It's the reality of the afterworld. In the hero's journey aspect of this, we don't have Bilgamesh actually going down to Netherworld. He goes to sort of an opening, and Enkidu's spirit comes up and describes the Netherworld to him. So he doesn't see it himself. He has sort of he's at the opening, but he doesn't journey into the Netherworld. And another note, of course, the dead need to be fed. They are looking for their ancestors and people who love them to give them, their descendants and people who love them to give them libations and food offerings in the afterworld. All right, so that's Bilgamesh and the Underworld, a very early version of the Netherworld. Now we'd like to talk about Sheol. Sheol is a place in the Hebrew, a place in the way that the afterworld is described in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. Here we have a little bit of a map of the ancient world as it would have been viewed by an Israelite, where we have the waters above the firmament, the floodgates, the firmament of the sky, which is a sort of a solid substance, oceans all around, and the abyss beneath them, down under the columns of the earth, and Sheol is down underneath the earth. So we have the earth, above the earth, the heavens, below the earth is Sheol. And this is conceived of in this kind of spatial way, not only in Israel, but in all over the ancient Middle East. We're talking, I sent the links of Jonah 2 and Psalm 88. And both of these texts picture Sheol, but they're both metaphorical for a kind of suffering, right? So where we really get the full descriptions of Sheol in the Hebrew Bible, it's mentioned in other contexts, but a lot of them are in lament psalms where you're lamenting your current suffering by depicting it as if you are already in Sheol. and asking God to get you out of Sheol. In the case of Jonah, you also have that metaphor going on with the idea that he's praying this lament from the belly of a giant fish who's down under the water. So the Jonah poem tends to work both with idea of Sheol and with the idea of another kind of Sheol that is being stuck inside of a whale or a big fish. All right, so Jonah 2, 3 through 4, 6 through 7. Here are some descriptions of Sheol. Out of my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From the womb of Sheol, I cried for help, and you heard my voice. You cast me into the deep, into the heart of the sea, and the flood enveloped me. All your breakers and your billows passed over me. The water surged around me up to my neck. The deep enveloped me. Seaweed wrapped around my head. I went down to the roots of the mountains. You can see the columns of the earth, the roots of the mountains, the columns of the mountains. To the land whose bars closed behind me forever. So going in there where you can't get back anywhere. But you brought up my life from the pit, oh my Lord, my God. Now, if you hadn't read all of the lament songs to talk about Sheol, you might just say, hey, this could all just be descriptions of being inside of a whale underneath the ocean. And it is. It works at that level for a lot of it. But it also uses traditional language of Sheol, especially the roots of the mountains, bars closing behind me forever, in the pit. These aren't places a fish would go. The fish would stay in the ocean, not go down into the abyss or the pit. The abyss and the pit seem to be similar, and the Sheol language as well is not a place where a giant fish would just go to take a break. These are afterworldly places, and so Jonah's using imagery that works in three levels, describing his own torment and suffering in terms of Sheol, describing Sheol, and describing the belly of a whale. In Psalm 88, we have a more traditional lament psalm. It's also going to describe the psalmist's personal trouble in terms of a journey to Sheol. For my soul is filled with troubles, he says. My life draws near to Sheol. I am reckoned with those who go down to the pit. There's that pit again. I am like a warrior without strength. My couch is among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave. You remember them no more. They are cut off from your influence. You plunge me into the bottom of the pit, into the darkness of the abyss. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and all your waves crash over me. So, like in Jonah, we have water imagery. Sheol is down here in the watery regions. That goes along with Sheol and the pit. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades arise and praise you? Is your mercy proclaimed in the grave and your faithfulness among those who have perished? Are your marvels declared in the darkness, your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion? And the psalm ends this way. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day they surge round like a flood. From every side they encircle me. Because of you, friend and neighbor shun me. My only friend is darkness. This psalm is usually talked about as the darkest lament in the Psalter because of its not ending on a note of, well, you're going to save me, but ending on the note of my only friend is darkness, which is, not a cheerful ending at all. But here we have darkness, water imagery, being trapped in a circular sort of place, oblivion, graves, the dead, all sort of the pit, the bottom of the pit, the darkness of the abyss, all of this coming together as a description of Sheol and the psalmist being there, at least emotionally. This is what we have then for Sheol in the Hebrew Bible. From these examples, anyway. We have dark, watery below the mountains, a lesser form of existence, it seems, oblivion. The hero is there and wants out. All dead mortals seem to go into Sheol, with the exception of someone like Elijah or someone like Enoch. But generally speaking, it's not that people don't go to Sheol if they're good. Rather, everyone goes to Sheol after they're dead. The logic of the suffering involved is tied to the wrath of Yahweh. That's what Psalm 88 describes his wrath over and over and over, and talks about the waves of sorrow that he's causing him. And the temporal aspects is that this is a temporary situation for the psalmist in the metaphor, all right? At least in Jonah and in most of these lament psalms. Psalm 88 doesn't really have much hope in it. But the idea is by praying to God, that saying that you're in the pit and asking him, can anyone praise you in Sheol? Couldn't you bring me out of Sheol so that I could praise you? The implication is that you can leave, right? You can leave the state metaphorically and get back to life as you knew it before. But there isn't a sense that once you're really in Sheol, that's going to end. Here in the Hebrew Bible, we don't have a lot of that. We don't have the idea that the people are going to rise out of Sheol until you get to some later texts where that kind of comes up. So, and then you've got shades. The shades praise you. So this is the people who live in Sheol seem to have some sort of ongoing existence, but it's a lesser form, like we said, and they're called shades. The witch of Endor, or the in 1 Samuel 28, she's able to call up the ghost of Samuel, and he is unhappy about that and seems to be sort of ghostly. So this is this is what we learn from an initial scan about Sheol in the Hebrew Bible. All right. Now we're moving, before I plunge from the Semitic tradition and this ancient Near Eastern tradition with Sumerian, does anyone have any questions about what I just rattled through? Any questions at this juncture? Okay. Now, the next thing we looked at was Odyssey, Book 11, the Odyssey, Book 11. And here we're having a description as Odysseus is talking to some folks along his journey, and he's describing his journey to the river Oceanus, which is at the mouth of the underworld. It also seems to sort of be in the underworld, like the underworld has an earthly portal, and it's in mist at the end of this river where certain folks live. And you can get to the dead pretty easily. You can see Hades pretty easily from this place. It's a hard place to get to. In this story, there's a focus on the people he encounters. So there's a lot of retelling of Greek myths in this story, or like talking about the Greek myths, as Homer demonstrates his knowledge of them through the encounters of Odysseus with Greek mythological characters, doing stuff that they ought to do based on the myths that they all knew about them, right? So that's a big focus. There's also a focus on his meeting people from his life. The guy he just lost in battle, that he's trying to touch base with, and his own mother. You do have some punishments at the end. Right? This text is about 8th century BC. Here we have the description of how this happens. Okay, so in Gilgamesh, he gets the gods to bring up Enkidu. But here we have a sacrificial method of reaching the underworld. The dark blood flowed, and there came out from Erebos the shades of corpses dead and buried. Erebos is a dark region of Hades, right? So this is where people go immediately after death. And it's not something he peers into. Hades itself, he seems to be sort of in. Erebos is the place where they're coming from. And the shades of corpses dead and buried, brides, still unmarried youths, toil-worn old men, tender young girls, their hearts still new to sorrow, and many with wounds inflicted by bronze-tipped spears. So these are the recently dead of a variety of kinds. They're coming up to drink the blood, okay? And then Odysseus is going to arrange them in various ways so that he can talk to them one at a time. After he has some conversations and such, he sees Minos, Zeus's illustrious son, holding a golden scepter, sitting in judgment over the dead as they, sitting or standing, brought each case before their lord in Hades' wide-gated realm. We see this also in Dante, in the reading I assigned. Minos as this judge in the afterworld, dealing with their cases as they bring to him and their lot in the afterlife. We also have instances of cause and effect punishments where you have people who are sort of doomed to a certain existence. Of course, Sisyphus in Hades here is still pushing up his rock and watching it come back down over and over as part of his punishment for the gods. There's several other myths that are summarized in this way, where the people of those myths are still in the afterworld doing the things that they were punished by doing. So in the Odyssey, we've got spatial features. The entrance is watery. Some figures have specific geographies within the text, some things that they are assigned to do and places they're assigned to be. We've got gods and demigods and dead mortals all there together. And some are okay and some are suffering. All of them seem to like the blood of the dead mortals seem to like the blood of animals, which is a little different from the ancient Middle Eastern cult of feeding the dead, in a sense. There are certain punishments that fit the crime and the suffering portions, but not all of them are suffering beyond the fact of being in a miserable death place. It's an ongoing situation. And in this case, Odysseus journeys to the mouth of Hades, and so he's there, he journeys to the Netherworld, but he's mostly standing there as the dead come up and report and tell him their stories after drinking the blood. They're not able to speak with him, they're not able to sort of recognize him and have a conversation with him until they drink the blood of sacrifices. He also sees the realm of Hades, but not Erebos. Okay, so that's the Odyssey. The Aeneid is very important for our discussion because it is the basis for Dante's Inferno, Dante's Divine Comedy. It's his primary inspiration. And the Aeneid also draws upon, of course, the Greek mythological tradition. And so it continues on with the sort of ideas we've seen already in the Odyssey. Aeneas, rather I said Aeneid, but Aeneas is the person's name. He is the paragon of pietas, which is the virtue of honoring who ought to be honored. This is what he is. He's the paragon of pietas. This is symbolized by his rescuing his father from burning Troy. He comes out of burning Troy. He sees that it's burning. He checks out everyone around him. His father's not with him. He runs back into the city, risking his life, finds his father, throws him on his shoulders, and carries him out of burning Troy. This is the prime example of what pietas is, what we translate piety. And for an ancient Roman, this was not simply something owed to the gods or a religious devotion, but it was giving the proper respect and fealty to those people and institutions that have done things for you. It's a gratitude expressed in proper devotion. So the proper devotion of a son toward his father is risking his life to carry him out of burning Troy. And Aeneas is showing this quality throughout the book. It ends up founding Rome. And so this is a sort of origin story for Rome that Virgil is writing in 30 BC or so. So in this book, in book 6 of the Aeneid, he is going to Dis, or the afterworld, with its various regions, to talk with his beloved father, get some more advice, have some chats. And here's what we got with this. He comes to a cave, a deep cave, yawning wide and vast, of jagged rock and sheltered by dark lake and woodland gloom, over which no flying creature could safely wing their way. Such a vapor from those black jaws was wafted to the vaulted sky, whence the Greeks speak of Avernus, the birdless place. That's not a very nice cave. It's stinky and bad. Here first, the priestess set in line 4 dark-backed heifers and pours wine upon them, their brows, and then plucking the topmost bristles from between the horns, lays them on the sacred fire for the first offering, calling aloud on Hecate, supreme both in heaven and in hell. Others set knives to their throats and catch the warm blood in bowls. That's the heifers, not themselves. But just before the rays and dawning of the early sun, the ground rumbled underfoot, the wooded ridges began to quiver, and through the gloom dogs seemed to howl as the goddess Hecate drew nigh. Away, away, you that are uninitiated, shrieks the seer. Withdraw from all the grove, and you rush on the road and unsheath your sword. Now Aeneas is the hour for courage, now for a dauntless heart. Somewhat she said, this is the Sibyl, and plunges madly into the open cave. He, with fearless steps, keeps pace with his advancing guide. So this is quite the entrance, quite the dramatic entrance into the afterworld. And then we have you gods who hold the dominion of the spirits, you voiceless shades, you chaos, and you Phlegethon, you broad hushed tracks of night. Suffer me to tell what I have heard. Suffer me of your grace to unfold secrets buried in the depth and darkness of the earth. So here we have some geographical features: chaos, depths, darkness underneath the earth, gained entrance by the mouth of a jagged, rocky, noxious cave. As they enter and make their way through Dis, the afterworld, we have various things that they see. I won't go over all of them, but I wanted to point out a few features. First of all, this one. At once are heard voices and wailing sore, the souls of infants weeping, whom, on the very threshold of the sweet life they shared not, torn from the breast, the black day swept off and plunged in bitter death. Near them were those on false charge condemned to die. Yet not without lot, not without judge are these places given. Minos presiding shakes the urn. It is he who calls a conclave of the silent and learns men's lives and misdeeds. So Minos is here, just like in the Odyssey, and we have the souls of infants weeping, who are in the fields of sorrow here. And so I thought it was interesting that in both Bilgamesh and here in the Aeneid, we have a feature, the question of what happens to infants when they die, stillborn infants, who focus here. And so that's very interesting, just as an aside. Not very far from here, outspread on every side, are shown the mourning fields. Such is the name they bear. Here those whom stern love has consumed with cruel wasting are hidden in walks withdrawn, embowered in a myrtle grove. Even in death, the pangs leave them not. This is interesting because it's something, if you've ever read the Inferno, you'll recognize this kind of thinking. This is a one-to-one correspondence of mortal afterworldly existence with mortal major focus or vice. Okay, so in Dante, he encounters very early on in his descent in the Inferno, a similar place where you have lovers, famous lovers in literature, who gave everything to be with each other and now are suffering those same pains in the afterlife. Virgil is already doing that, and this goes along with Roman thoughts about the dangers of love. In Hellenistic philosophy, falling in love and doing anything for love was not considered to be a clear virtue as it is in the modern era, but rather a very dangerous and potentially and usually viceful thing that led one into the shoals of despair and pangs and lack of self-control and general teenage stupidity. So this is what we're talking about here. Stern love has consumed with cruel wasting. So they are being wasted away with their pangs of their love. Not very friendly, but that's what's happening. And so we have that going on in this sort of, this is still the dis area, which isn't necessarily the Tartarus, which is the place of severe punishment, nor Elysium, the place of bliss, but sort of, these people are going to chill out unhappily forever. But they're not being punished. They're just stuck in the things they were doing in life. All right. Here, this third paragraph comes, you see a couple hundred lines later when when Aeneas is in the place of punishment and torment. And we have this depiction of those who are being punished. Here were they who in lifetime hated their brethren, or smote a sire and entangled a client in a wrong, or have brooded in solitude over wealth they had won, or set aside a portion for their kin. The largest number of this, who were slain for adultery, or who followed the standard of treason, and feared not to break the allegiance with their lords, all these immured await their doom. Seek not to learn that doom, or what form of crime or fate overwhelmed them. Some roll a huge stone, or hang outstretched on spokes of wheels, and so on. So they are, these folks are committed crimes and they're awaiting punishment. And that is this very full development of an afterlife that matches the moral character of the person's life, straightforwardly, more so than we have in Bilgamesh, and more so than we have in the Hebrew Bible, where everyone goes to Sheol, except for maybe a couple really special folks. Here we have, okay, you're going to be divvied up into your different realms. You're going to be punished according to your crimes. Here we have the description of these realms. On they went dimly beneath the lonely night, and mid the gloom through the empty halls of Dis and his phantom realm, even as under the niggard light of a fitful moon lies the path of the forest when Jupiter has buried the sky in shade and black night has stolen from the world her hues. And this is when they're coming in. And down here at the bottom, night is coming, Aeneas. We waste the hours in weeping. Here is the place where the road parts. There to the right, as it runs under the walls of the great Dis, is our way to Elysium, the heaven, essentially. But to the left wreaks the punishment of the wicked and sends them on to pitiless Tartarus. Okay, so that is your Dis, your sort of holding ground and unhappy place, but not punishing place. Tartarus, place of great punishment, and Elysium, a place of everlasting happiness and general satisfaction. All right, the last quote from this Aeneid, a beautiful work of literature, by the way. Recommend just reading all of it. Then Tartarus itself yawns sheer down, stretching into the gloom twice as far as is the upward view of the sky toward heavenly Olympus. Here, the ancient sons of earth, the Titans' brood, hurled down by the thunderbolt, writhe in the lowest abyss. This is important. The ancient sons of earth, the Titans' brood, hurled down by the thunderbolt, writhe in the lowest abyss. These are giants that tried in various ways to unseat the gods. So here's some description of them. The twin sons of Eleos, giant in statue, whose hands try to tear down the high heaven and thrust down Jove from his realm above. Some Aeneas too I saw, who paid cruel penalty while while aping Job's fires and the thunders of Olympus. Borne by 4 horses and brandishing a torch, he rode triumphant through the Greek peoples and his city in the heart of Elis, claiming as his own the homage of deity. Madman, to mimic the storm clouds and inimitable thunder with brass and the tramp of horn-footed horses. But the Father Almighty, that is Jove, amid thick clouds launched his bolt. No firebrands he, nor pitch pine smoky glare, and drove him headlong with furious whirlwind. Likewise, one might see Tityus, nursling of earth and mother of all, over 9 full acres. His body is stretched, and a monstrous vulture with crooked beak gnaws at his deathless liver and vitals, fruitful of anguish. Deep within the breast he lodges and gropes for his feast, nor is any respite given to the filaments that grow anew. Why tell of Lepith, Ichion, and Pirithous, and of him, Tantalus, over whom hangs a black crag that seems ready to slip and fall at any moment? So here are some guys in the abyss, writhing in the lowest abyss of Tartarus. And it seems that this is in Plato's Gorgias, we see this. In the Tartarus is made for these folks. They are giants who have been cast on by Jove. They tried to usurp Jove, and Jove had his revenge, and they are bound into the deepest part of the abyss of the earth. This should sound familiar to you from your training in Christianity, because this is very similar to stories that we know. All right, and one of those similarities we're going to go to next. But first, let's summarize Tartarus, etc., in the Aeneid. This is the afterworld. In this case, has regions, including the holding place awaiting the ferryman, Tartarus, a realm of punishment, and Elysium, which is a kind of paradise. All mortals and some gods and demigods belong there, and mortals are divided into regions, so actually similar to demigods. Logic of suffering, the punishments are inflicted by a region, and the regions are partially defined by crimes. All right, so what you were in life will determine where you end up in Dis or Tartarus and so on. This is an ongoing reality. And in this case, we have Aeneas actually traveling into the Netherworld with Sibyl as his guide. And he's changed by the sight of the Netherworld and the meeting of his father. So we have a true hero's journey here where Aeneas is made better by his journey. And again, this is the exact thing that happens with Dante later on. And it's important to note that Tartarus was originally built for giants who defied the gods. All right, next, we've got the Book of Enoch. All right, the Book of Enoch is a very cool book that you should know all about. It's trippy, and if you've ever gotten into weird internet magic games of any kind, you will recognize many names from its pages. But in any case, it is a book, originally a series of Aramaic texts that are joined together by editors around similar themes. And so it's not all one work, but we're going to kind of talk about it that way. It dates from about 300 to 100 BC. These are ancient Jewish writers who draw on traditions known in the Bible, but the book itself is not part of the Jewish canon, the Hebrew Bible, except for some Ethiopian Jews. It became really big in Ethiopia, both for Ethiopian Jews and for Ethiopian Christians. It's cited in Jude, so it's cited as a text of authority in Jude. So Jude, the author of Jude, thinks of the Book of Enoch as containing true insights about the world. It's known to us in Aramaic fragments, in Greek translation, and in Ge'ez, which is a kind of Semitic language in Ethiopia, and the only full translation is in Ge'ez. Here on the screen is a picture of the page of Enoch written in Ge'ez. All right, so why are we looking at Enoch? In our case, there's lots of reasons to look at Enoch, but today we're going to focus on the binding of angels and casting them into darkness. All right, so here we have the first instance of this. And again, the Lord said to Raphael, in Enoch 10:4. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see the light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. And he goes on to talk about healing the earth. So what happens here is this is a story of a bunch of different angels who are up in heaven, binding themselves in a compact together to leave heaven, go down to earth to a certain mountain, and start teaching mankind secret knowledge. It gives them metallurgy and cosmetics and astrology, all different kinds of things that are mentioned in this text. It draws on the weird few verses in Genesis 6:1-4, where it says, in those days, the sons of God slept with the daughters of men, and they had giants called the Nephilim, and this was bad. All right, so they're saying these are the angels that came down and cohabited with human women and created giants. And they also taught humans things they shouldn't know. This is an early form of the technological irritation. All right, so if you've ever been to a talk where someone's like, we are in the modern era where technology has destroyed our souls and we no longer are human beings and we must fight this. This is the same thing that's being said in the book of Enoch in 300 BC, but with respect not to iPhones, but to weapons and cosmetics. All right, so we have Azazel is one of those angels. He's a prime guy, not the only one. His name comes from Leviticus 16, where there's a mention of Azazel being in the desert, taking a goat out to him, but that's neither here nor there. And we also then, as Enoch is asking some questions of Uriel and other angels, Raphael, he's up in heaven getting some insight, right? And here's some stuff he learns more about this. So from the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits having gone forth shall destroy without incurring judgment. These giants that were the result of the angels inhabiting with the women. Thus shall they destroy until the day of consummation, the great judgment in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers of the angels, and the godless, yea, shall be wholly consummated. So we have a sort of binding and destruction that awaits a future judgment. All right, this is a new sort of thing. So we're dealing with a binding and holding in the dark regions of the earth, the abyss, for the final judgment. And these are the names of the holy angels who watch. Uriel, one of the holy angels who is over the world and over Tartarus. Okay, so this is a mention of our Greek and Latin, our classical word for the dark, punishing region of Hades. Right here in the book of Enoch, Tartarus. So now we have, in Jewish tradition, a more fully developed idea of hell as a place that could be, exists. That's not just Sheol, right? It's not just the Netherworld. It is a place of punishment where bad angels are bound, and giants and spirits of giants who were destroyed. And he goes along, Enoch does. I proceeded to where things were chaotic, and I saw there something horrible. I saw neither a heaven above nor a firmly founded earth, but a place chaotic and horrible. And there I saw 7 stars of the heaven bound together in it like great mountains and burning with fire. And I said, for what sin are they bound, and on what account have they been cast hither? Then said Uriel, one of the holy angels who was with me and was chief over them, and said, Enoch, why dost thou ask, and why art thou eager for the truth? These are the numbers of the stars of heaven, which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and are bound here till 10,000 years, entailed by their sins, are consummated. Then he goes to another place, which is more horrible than the former, and saw a horrible thing, a great fire there which burned and blazed, and the place was cleft as far as the abyss, being full of a great descending columns of fire. Then he said, how fearful is this place? How terrible it is to look upon. And Uriel asked him again why he's being afraid. And then he says, because of this fearful place and because of the spectacle of the pain, and he said unto me, this place is the prison of the angels, and here they will be imprisoned forever. So we have stars that sin against God, we've got angels that sin against God, and they are bound in fiery places. So here, what is probably Tartarus is pictured, as in Virgil, as a place of fire and doom and binding of demigod type things, divine entities, but not God himself, by God to await their judgment. We also have divisions made. He goes on to ask about some shallow places in the earth that he sees. And here we have the book of Enoch talking about the spirits of the dead being separated, spirits of the righteous, in which there is a bright springs of water. And then there's a place for sinners where they die and they're buried in the earth, and the judgment has not been executed on them in their lifetime, and it's going to be executed. And then there are those who make their suit, who are like, hey, I don't deserve this, and I got murdered, and I'm trying to, while I was still a sinner, and I would like to have another chance. And they are going to be raised and face judgment and could possibly leave this place. So we have three types of place. We've got the good guys who are done totally good, the bad guys who are totally bad, and then those who need to make their case. It's not purgatory per se, but it's a sort of middle ground, like we see in Dis. And one of those is Abel, right? In this passage, he says, this is Abel, the spirit that went forth from Abel, when whom his brother Cain slew, and he makes a suit against him till his seed is destroyed from the face of the earth, and his seed is annihilated from among the seed of men. And so Abel's there making his suit and asking for justice. All right, so punishment in Enoch. We've got Tartarus, rocks and darkness, fiery abyss, and shallow places for the dead, divided into by moral category. Who belongs there? The real bad places, Tartarus with its fiery descriptions, and a place in the rock and the noxious place that Enoch is, or that Azazel is sent, where he can't see in darkness. Those are for punished angels. Those are, no humans are spoken of as being there. It's just the angels. Mortals have their spot in the places in the ground that are more shallow and aren't the full realm of Tartarus in this book. The punishments that are going on for the suffering is directly the result of punishment inflicted by the will of God and carried out by other angels. This is an ongoing situation, 10,000 years, but it's awaiting a final judgment. This isn't going to be the final case. Some of these angels are going to be taken out of the pit where they're bound and then destroyed in fire. And some of the humans are waiting their resurrection or their case to be heard. In this case, the hero's journey features Enoch traveling not to the Netherworld. He sees these places, but he's being shown them by an angel from heaven, right? So he's up with the angels, the good angels, because he was taken by God. In the book of Genesis, it says, in the middle of a genealogy, there's a verse that says, Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. It's a perplexing verse. The book of Enoch likes to find these perplexing things in the rest of the Old Testament and make hay out of them. They make Enoch a person who journeyed to heaven to gain wisdom. They take Genesis 6:1-4 and make a whole story about that. And they take the name Azazel from Leviticus 16 and make him a character as well. So the writers here are very well schooled in what we think of as the Bible, and they are using that to describe a whole bunch of different things that are true of the world. So Enoch is in heaven looking down at this stuff. He's not really journeying to it, but he kind of is, and it's changing him and is able to share this with us. All right. We are through the ancient world and into the New Testament, which is also the ancient world. But when I see the clock tick from BC to AD, my inclination is to think we're no longer in the ancient world. That's just because I'm an ancient Near Eastern person. But anyway, first century, we've got Jesus and the New Testament. And what do we have going on here? In the Old Testament, you'd be hard pressed to schematize Sheol into hell and heaven and purgatory or anything else like that. You'd have a very misty, shadowy, dark, bad underworld, and you don't have that much else. In the New Testament, you've got a more fully developed picture, all right? And we've got the use of Greek words to describe it, as the Bible is, the New Testament is written in Greek. And we've got the importation of some Greek categories, I think, as well, which is we've seen already in the book of Enoch, so it's not surprising to find it in the New Testament. The word Hades, which is where Odysseus went, is used in the New Testament many times for what we call hell. All right, so what we think of as hell. So I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the Netherworld, translate to NAB, the New American Bible Revised Standard Version, the Catholic modern translation. But we know it as the gates of hell will not prevail against it, right? That's what we would say if we had to recite the verse. And the Netherworld they've used there because the Greek word is hadu, the genitive of Hades, right? So this is Hades is the word used here. Now, this is not surprising because when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, what we call the Septuagint, Sheol, the Hebrew word Sheol, was constantly translated by the Greek word Hades. So we have, okay, Sheol is Hades. And that could be as simple as that. That Jesus is saying, Sheol shall not prevail against it. But I will point out to you the next instance, Luke 16:23. And from Hades, where the rich man was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. This comes from the parable of Lazarus, poor Lazarus, and the rich man. You know, Lazarus tried to get the rich man to help him out. He wouldn't do it. And then Lazarus went up to the bosom of Abraham. And he's chilling out with Abraham. And the rich man is down in Hades being tormented. And he says, could you please just give me a drop of water? And Lazarus says, I can't. Sorry. Jesus is telling this story, and here the word Hades is used, and we're talking about torment. So this is something now developed beyond the world of Sheol, Netherworld, into the realm of punitive. The rich man deserves this torment. He's being tormented. He can't be helped. This is Hades, and this is more the Greek idea of Hades. And developed alongside this idea of punishment for moral actions. We have the Hades personified in Revelation. We've got the sea giving up its dead, and death and Hades giving up their dead. And the dead were judged according to their deeds, and then death and Hades were thrown into the pool of fire. So this pool of fire, which we see in Revelation, seems very similar to what we just saw in Enoch, where there's something else beyond Hades, hell. There's something else beyond death itself. It is the lake of fire. And this is where the fallen angels are going to go, along with Satan, their ruler. Satan is not a major figure in the book of Enoch. He's not really thought of as a singular entity at that point. But this is where they're all going to go. But also death and Hades were now kind of personified as entities, much like they were in the ancient Greek and Roman world, where they were both places and deities, right? They are thrown into the pool of fire. So we have death and Hades going on here as well. And then finally, or not finally, but here in 2 Peter 2:4, for if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but condemned them to the chains of Tartarus and handed them over to be kept for judgment. This is actually a verb form, but it is from the Greek Tartarus, which is, as we've been seeing, the real bad place where angels are bound. So Peter, the author of 2 Peter here, also knows of this tradition of angels being bound in Tartarus, a specific place of fiery punishment, drawn from the Greco-Roman tradition. All right, so that's hell and Tartarus, Hades and Tartarus in the New Testament. But also we've got the concept of the harrowing of hell. Where does it come from? What about Christ going to hell? So let's look at this. In Ephesians 4:8, the word hell is not used, but it says this about Jesus. Therefore it says, he ascended on high and took prisoners captive. He gave gifts to men. This is a quotation of a psalm. And then he goes on to explain it. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended into the lower regions of the earth? And this word here in Greek, katotera, the lower regions or the things below the earth. All right, interesting. This is taken up by the Apostles' Creed. So this, the Catholic tradition, Christianity generally from the 1st and 2nd centuries on, has viewed as Christ descending into Hades, the Netherworld, hell, the lower regions of the earth, Netherworld. And this is taken up in the Apostles' Creed. So you see here, the earliest form of the Apostles' Creed is in Greek. It says, katalanta esta katotata. He descended into the lower regions. Here we have Ephesians 4:9, katabe esta katotera, tes ge. So this seems to draw on this kind of language, katotera, kato, tata. They're both the sort of lower regions. The people here that live in the lower regions, here it's the place itself. And this is also used in the Latin version of the Apostles' Creed, descendet ad inferos, that is the lower regions, the folks in the underworld, the underfolk, the underplace. This is the Latin used at Trent and in the current Catechism of the Catholic Church. In the English, we translate it as he descended into hell. But it's not inferno, it's not fiery hell. It's inferos, the lower places. He descended to the lower places. And that is, we believe that is hell, and that's why the English translates it as hell. But in the Apostles' Creed, in both the Greek and the Latin, it's to the lower regions, echoing Ephesians 4:8. We also have this amazing passage from 1 Peter, which is Peter's providing us all kinds of fun stuff. In the Spirit, that is, after he died, in the Spirit, he went also to preach to the spirits in prison, who had once been disobedient, while God patiently waited in the days of Noah during the building of the ark, in which a few persons, 8 in all, were saved through water. Okay, so this seems to have two possible interpretations. This could be those folks who were disobedient to God right before the flood, the humans on earth, who were just like, Noah, what are you doing with that boat? That's ridiculous. They're in some sort of prison. Or it could be a direct reference to this tradition that we just saw in Enoch of the spirits in prison who had been disobedient. That is, those angels who have been disobedient that led up to the flood, because of, in the book of Enoch, this is why the flood comes, is these angels have descended from heaven, done all kinds of bad, disobedient things, and now they're imprisoned. Could be that Jesus is preaching to them. In any case, it's not 100% sure who these folks are, but here we definitely have a tradition of Jesus going into a place called a prison in his spirit and preaching to them that has to do with Noah's flood situation. So these are old dead spirits. So this is definitely Jesus going to some sort of what we would consider Tartarus, Hades, Netherworld, some non-earthly but place where people are after death. All right, so it's hard to read that any other way. All right, so Christ, descent and Hades in the New Testament we just covered. Spatial features. Christ goes down to the underworld of some kind or another, prison where spirits are in captivity. Who belongs in these places? Possibly all the dead, and then for the underworld, when he descends into hell, or descends into the lower parts of the earth. Also spirits from before the flood, in the case of the First Peter passage. The logic of any suffering, punishments are afflicted by the will of God, same throughout all of this, and ongoing but waiting and final judgment is just the same. And here the hero, Jesus, journeys to the netherworld, accomplishes a mission, and ascends to heaven. In none of these other places, the stereotype of the hero's journey into the netherworld is the hero is changed by the encounter with the narrow world. I'm not so sure that that is what's implied. Now, Jesus, when he comes out of it, is radically changed and has a spiritual body, visits the apostles, ascends to heaven, and is Lord of all. But the relationship is flipped. God resurrects Jesus and gives him that victory, but Jesus changes the place he's going to. Right? He preaches to the spirits in heaven. He goes and then brings up gifts. In Ephesians, he ascends to, he takes prisoners captive, gave gifts to men. So he is the one who changes things by his descent into hell. He's not changed himself by the virtue of hell, I don't think. So here we have then the way this comes into early Christianity. Now, I could have given you a bunch of quotes from early Christian authors. Tertullian, Irenaeus, and a bunch of other folks mention this tradition, some in favor, some against. But by the 2nd century, this is this idea of Jesus going to hell and leading people out of it is firmly established as something that people are talking about and believing in the Christian church. I choose to give you a full version of it from the Gospel of Nicodemus. I can send this to you. I don't think I actually include this in the readings. If you're interested in reading this very interesting thing, I will send it to you. It is an apocryphal gospel dating likely to the 4th century, so it's not one of the 4 gospels. It's an early Christian traditional writing, but it's not it's not in the canon, right? And it has a major dramatic section on Christ descending to hell, which is written in Greek and flourished eventually throughout the church in Latin. In this gospel, we have a full representation of this widespread early Christian tradition, namely that Christ not only preached to the spirits, but led out the righteous dead and brought them with him back to heaven. Here we start to see where the mystery plays that we started with get their subject. Here we have Angelica picturing this. Here Christ is grasping the hand of Adam, and all the folks come with him. And down, we've got the devil and Hades chilling out, being upset. So there's a bunch that goes on with this. This is a very full treatment. I'm not going to read a bunch of it, but here's a little bit. While the saints were rejoicing, because they get what's going on, behold, Satan, the prince and chief of death, said unto hell, make thyself ready to receive Jesus, who boasts himself that he is the Son of God, whereas he is a man that fears death and says, my soul is sorrowful even unto death, and he has been much my enemy, doing me great hurt, and many that I had made blind, lame, dumb, leprous, and possessed, he has healed with a word, and some whom I have brought unto thee dead, he has taken away from me. So Satan is annoyed with Jesus, happy to be receiving him into hell. And as Satan, the prince, and hell spoke this together, suddenly, so hell here, by the way, is personified, much as we have hell is Hades throughout here. The Greek word here is Hades. Hades is personified in Revelation, personified here too. They're talking together, and suddenly there came a voice as of thunder and a spiritual cry, remove, princes, your gates, and be left up, O everlasting doors, the King of glory shall come in. When hell heard that, he said to Satan the prince, "Depart from me and go out of my abode. If you are a mighty man of war, fight against the King of glory. But what have you to do with him?" And hell cast Satan forth out of his dwelling. Then said hell unto his wicked ministers, "Shut up the hard gates of brass and put on the bars of iron, and withstand stoutly, lest we hold that whole captivity be taken captive." So the saints hear this and say, "Open up thy gates that the King of glory may come in," which is from the Psalms. And David cried out, saying, "Did I not, when I was alive upon earth, foretell unto you, let them give thanks unto the Lord, even his mercies and his wonders unto the children of men who have broken the gates of brass and smitten the bars of iron asunder?" That's from a psalm. "He had taken them out of the way of their iniquity." And likewise, and thereafter, in like manner, Isaiah said, "Did I, when I was alive upon earth, foretell to you, the dead shall arise, and they that are in the tomb shall rise again, and they that are in the earth shall rejoice, for the dew which comes of the Lord is their healing? And again I said, O death, where is thy sting? O hell, where is thy victory?" And it goes on. So this was very fascinating because it draws together the Old Testament traditions about these things. And then Jesus comes in, thwarts Satan, tricking him, which is a common theme in this Christus Victor sort of Christology, where Jesus tricks Satan. He basically comes down to heaven like a fish, and Satan takes the bait, and then Jesus leads out of hell Adam and the rest of the righteous dead. All right, so in this case, Christ goes down to personify Hades and tricks Satan, leading Adam and many others out of the realm of Hades. All the dead belong there. Hades and Satan have certain rights. Jesus defeats them and proves them that he's legally defeated them. Then this is an ongoing but waiting final judgment situation. And in this case, the hero's journey is Christ journeying to Hades and spoiling it, harrowing it, extracting good souls and defeating Hades and Satan. He has not changed so much as he changes. And Hades is pictured not as so terrifying as terrified. All right, that brings us back to the grand picture, the most detailed, imaginative telling of hell, purgatory, and paradise in the Christian intellectual tradition. Dante's Divine Comedy. I had you read sections from the Inferno. And Dante is drawing together a lot of different things. So not just these two things, but a lot of different things Dante is drawing together. And he is drawing his study in the classics, he's drawing his study of theology, and he's creating a whole system. His main influence, noted very obviously by making Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid, his guide through the Inferno, is the Aeneid. He's drawing on the Aeneid and creating an updated version of that. And he's also drawing on virtue and vice theory that comes out of the Dominican school via Thomas Aquinas. So for Dante, punishment is mapped on in all of the realms of the Inferno and perfectly demonstrated in the actions of people there. Is mapped onto the vices. So vices produce their own punishments. And so people are not just punished, but they are producing their own punishment. And this is a bringing together then of all of these traditions that we've talked about. Now, he's starting with Virgil, but since the Greek and Latin tradition end up influencing the New Testament's conception of these things, Dante starts with Virgil's afterlife and not only brings Christian thinking into it, but by starting with them and proceeding through the New Testament and so on, ends up the line that goes from Virgil to Dante actually goes through the New Testament, as I showed you, with the language of Hades, the language of Tartarus, and the relationship of the classical view of hell and the binding of the angels. That is all brought into Dante, but not just like he's combining classical and Christian sources, but classical and Christian sources were already enmeshed from the very first moment of Christian thinking. which is very interesting to me. All right, so here's Dante's brief description of the harrowing of hell. He doesn't have a lot to say about this. He mentions it a few times, but here's the most detailed description. Tell me, my master, tell me, thou my lord, began I, with the desire of being certain of that faith which overcometh every error. Came anyone by his own merit hence, or by another's, who was blessed thereafter? And he, who understood my covert speech, replied, I was a novice in this state when I saw hither come a mighty one, with a sign of victory and coronet. Hence he drew forth the shade of the first parent, and that of his son Abel, and of Noah, of Moses the lawgiver, and the obedient Abraham, patriarch, and David, king, Israel with his father and his children, and Rachel, for whose sake he did so much. And others many, and he made them blessed. And thou must know that earlier than these never were any human spirits saved. This is the picture of the harrowing of hell in Dante. Now, Dante's Divine Comedy lays out the netherworld, the afterworld in this way, traveling through regions of hell, purgatory, and heaven, guided by Virgil himself, the author of Aeneid, and eventually by Beatrice. Every living person, and for Dante, that's human persons that he knew that died last year, and Greek legendary persons, centaurs, and Minos features in Dante, as you read in the reading that we looked at. So he's combining all of these traditions. Every living person, demigod, god, angel, demon, saints, sinners, halfway houses, they're all here in the one of these three spheres. The logic of the suffering in Dante is that punishments are inflicted perfectly according to vice. And the vices continue the torment of the person defined by them. The temporal aspect, again, is ongoing but awaiting final judgment. There is a sense that there's something more to come. In the hero's journey aspect, Dante's journey leads to his eventual salvation. So here, the hero's journey is Dante being changed by this whole experience through these realms. And then, of course, as I've been saying, he brings together Virgil and Christianity, especially the Thomist variety, but in a way that also brings and fleshes out the classical influence that was already in the New Testament itself. All right, that is what I have prepared for this topic. Are there any questions or any desire to talk about any parts of the text that you read that I did not touch upon? Because I gave a very specific kind of thing.
Charles, how you doing?
Good. Hey, how's it going, Rick?
Good. It's Mike.
Oh, it's Mike. Sorry, I thought it was.
That's all right. No, it's okay. Can you help me understand where purgatory? I mean, I see the temporal areas, and maybe what is it? The dis, the great dis, could be like considered a place of purgation, or the purgatory. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So purgatory has a bit of a different trajectory than I've laid out, and there's passages in the Book of Jubilees that talk about something like this. Certainly you have hints of it already in Enoch, and it's I'd have to go look at the early church history on it, and like when it becomes a fully developed notion. So yeah, I'm not able to give you a super good answer on that one, but it's dis, yeah, has that sort of element in the Aeneid. But the Christian doctrine of it is not very strongly developed in the New Testament, but there's some basis for it in the Book of Jubilees, and then it becomes, I think, extrapolation on dead and hell, giving up the dead, these awaiting the final judgment even just the notion that when you're dead, you're in this holding place, and then you're awaiting the final judgment, could be something like a hope for purgatory. Yeah. That's not the most satisfying to me answer, but that's what I can do with it. Yeah.
Also, I got a
Rick,
question.
yeah.
Yeah. So first off, that was very interesting. Thank you. My question really had to do with like, how does this vision of heaven or the idea of resurrection or an afterlife develop? Because initially, it sounds like in the Hebrew faith, it was Sheol, and that was it. You were just dead. We read in the Gospels about what, when they were testing Jesus, where the Sadducees come up with a thing, but they don't actually believe in the resurrection, but they concoct a fanciful story of a woman with many husbands in order to test Jesus. So there, at least at that point, seems to have been some debate in the Jewish community. But then we made a transition, at least as Christians, that there is a heaven and a blissful afterlife possibility. So how did that develop and roll out?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So this actually has an even earlier genesis than hell and purgatory in a certain way, because we have the images of resurrection of the dead in Isaiah and Daniel, in certain visions. When we start to get apocalyptic literature, you get visions of people being up in heaven. So, and certainly by the time of Jesus, we have this fully developed notion of being with Abraham. And in many Jewish apocalyptic texts that aren't in the Hebrew Bible, this eternal destination sort of thing, where the good guys end up in heaven, is fully fleshed out. And so, resurrection starts in the later Old Testament and then continues as a major theme within Jewish apocalypticism primarily. And that's what Enoch is. It's an apocalyptic text like Revelation. There you have what some would describe, this is a very sociological kind of reading, but what some would describe as Jewish folks and under the oppression of the Greek Empire are picturing, the righteous are faced with some choices, right? So are we going to go along and become Hellenized, or are we going to stick to our traditions and our faith, do circumcision, keep kosher, keep Shabbat? And this idea of angels falling from heaven is sometimes related to Jews becoming Hellenized, going along with the modern era of its time, and instead of sticking with the tradition, shaving their beards, running around naked in the Colosseums, and eating pork and so on. This is sometimes thought of as like, okay, so we've got the righteous Jews and the evil Jews, and they're the ones who fell from heaven. And this is so the apocalypse shows us the cosmic judgment, and this is what ends up sort of coming into the resurrection of the righteous versus the hell of the damned. When you are in the community faces, it's not the idea that you're going to be, if you're righteous, you're going to succeed, becomes counterintuitive. The book of Proverbs becomes problematic because the Greeks and then the Romans are oppressing us, and it's the righteous Jews who get the most grief. It's the ones who cooperate and adapt the Greek and Roman traditions that get the least grief, but they're going to get theirs in the end, right? So that's a sort of a sociological, historical explanation for how it develops, but it's also just drawing on promises that's a purely sociological thing. But the other thing is that the picture of what is to come, the new heavens and the new earth, and something like Isaiah, where they're picturing a new covenant and a new people and a new situation, this starts to become a way that God will fulfill his promises to his people. And that's the form that Jesus is grasping when he talks about the kingdom of God and then the righteous judgment, like in Matthew 25, who enters that kingdom. And then in Revelation, the new heavens and the new earth, that they're latching onto that promise that this isn't happening here and now, but it will eventually. The promise exceeds the possibilities of the political realities of the present time. Carol.
Yes, thank you so much. This is very enlightening. Two quick things I just want to ask. One, in Virgil's description of the infants that are weeping, could we say that's foreshadowing of the aborted babies today, where they have a soul? They're not born, but could we include them in those weeping infants in that description, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. For sure. I don't think abortion wasn't a huge topic in the ancient world because babies were so desired. It was more of a stillborn thing that they're thinking of. But but yes, yeah. I don't know that. I think in Catholic theology, babies don't go to purgatory. Is that right? I think that's right. I'm gonna get in trouble. They go straight to heaven, right? So, so just to be clear, they're not in a mourning field weeping. I don't think. I think they're with Jesus. But
well, it used to be a thought that they would go into limbo, which is shown in Dante's description.
Right, limbo. Yes, limbo is a part of. Limbo is like a space between. Yeah, but that's right. We got the babies out of limbo. That's right.
Yeah. Right.
And then that's real true. The three spheres, how you described them in Dante, could you just go over that one more time? How you said every living person in one of the three spheres, but how did you, what did you say about that when you closing?
Thanks for clarifying that. I mean, the Inferno, hell, purgatory, or heaven. So everyone's in one of those places. Yeah.
Okay. In today's Jewish tradition, when a Jewish person dies, they believe that that's it. Am I generalizing too much?
Most modern Jewish folks will tell you that there's no heaven or hell in Judaism. That's not strictly true throughout history, right? Obviously, there is our rigorous ideas of heaven and hell come from Judaism. And throughout the Middle Ages, there were beliefs in both in Judaism. It's not as strong of a thing as in Christianity. And there are some Jews today who still believe in heaven and hell, especially the more traditional they are, the more likely they are to believe that, I would say. But your sort of Reformed Jewish folks would likely say in most cases that they don't believe in the afterlife, and Judaism doesn't teach about the afterlife. So, but there's like a blend of things there. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yes, Elise. Oh, sorry, you're muted there.
I was interested in the part in the Gospel of Nicodemus where Christ tricks Hades, goes into Hades, tricks Satan, but he gets through. He gets through the gates of hell. And I thought of Peter being told, "And the gates of hell shall not prevail against you." You often think of that as the church being defensive against hell, but maybe it has that opposite meaning, that the church is meant to prevail against the gates of hell and break through and release. Yes, that's something.
I love that. Yeah, the gates of hell is not prevail against you. Yeah, that's right. And that's the way in which the church can share in the ongoing work of Christ, right? In some ways, hell there is generalized, so the distinction between Hades and purgatory isn't clear. But this is one reason we pray for the dead. We're trying to to steal them from a realm of death and bring them to help them through Christ's work, to attain eternal life. That's yeah, and I gave you a very intellectual history here, which I hope is fun, but we should emphasize that this is a wonderful and hopeful thing that Christ has done, right? That the harrowing of hell is taken up by some as even not a sort of one-time thing, but as a part of Christ's work, bringing souls from hell, part of the church's work. I don't want to get into a big theological discussion about universalism, which I am not qualified to talk about. But if you wanted to ask Dr. Kuhner about it sometime, who's a von Balthasar scholar, he would be the one to ask. Yeah, but there's a way of taking it that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. Did you? Oh yeah, we are well into our time. I wasn't sure what time it was. I'm sorry. I went on for a long time. Thank you very much for bearing with me on that and coming along.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending tonight, and of course a big thanks to Dr. Hughes Huff for doing this for us, our in-house scripture scholar. And I'll be sure to send everyone a follow-up email with a link to this recording if there's anything you missed, and a couple of the things I mentioned at the beginning, like our summer free audit, our upcoming Words with Wine and Theology and Culture events. So thank you all for being here.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.